very good afternoon to all. I am Professor Anuradha Jain, Professor of Economics at Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. Today we are going to discuss about inflation. All of you know that every day, day-to-day life, we always say that prices are going up, inflation rate is very high. So in this session, we are going to discuss about what is inflation, what are the different causes of inflation, impact of inflation, how to control inflation, so on and so forth. The problem of inflation is as old as market system, but a persistent, continuous and high rate of inflation, generally if we say like 5% or more, has emerged during the post-war II period. Inflation has been the most intraceable economic problem for both theoreticians and policymakers all over the world. The problem of inflation has received a more serious attention since the early 1970s. A continuous rise in a general price level over a long period of time has been the most common feature of both developed and developing countries. For example, the US was facing the problem of high rate of inflation like 5% or more, even though the US economy is facing the recession. India, a fast developing nation growing at a rate of 9% per annum, was facing a high rate of inflation over 12% in the second half of 2008, which has created economic, social and also political problems of the country. Persistent inflation is perhaps the second most serious macroeconomic problem confronting the world economy today, second only to the hunger and poverty in the third world. Now, in a broad sense of the term inflation, it means a considerable, persistent rise in a general price level over a period of time. However, there is no universally acceptable definition of inflation. The definition of inflation has been, in fact, a matter of economist opinion on price rise and its causes. Now, inflation generally means, continuous rise in general price level over a long period of time. However, different economists have defined inflation in different ways. Like some of the definition, if we see, like according to Professor A.C. Pigou, inflation exists when money income is expanding more than in proportion to increase in the earning capacity or earning activity of the economy. Crowther, for example, says a state in which the value of money is falling, that is, prices are rising, is known as inflation. Now, if one goes by the definition of inflation given by some modern economist, then any rise in general price level is not inflation. In their opinion, only a persistent, prolonged and sustained and a considerable, appreciable rise in the general price level can be called inflation. Though the term persistent, prolonged and sustained are not defined precisely, but it implies that if price rise is not persistent, prolonged or sustained, it is not inflation, whatever be the rate of increase in the prices in general. Now, since economic condition of different countries and their ability to absorb the inflation vary from country to country and even within the country from time to time, it is not justifiable to specify a rate of price rise to be called inflation. Now, each country has to find for itself the desirable rate of inflation at different point of time and to formulate policy measures accordingly to control this problem of inflation. Now, what is desirable rate of inflation? The question as to what is desirable rate of inflation can be answered by linking it to the economic and social needs of the country. In general, a moderate rate of inflation is considered to be desirable and acceptable for at least for three reasons. First, a moderate rate of inflation keeps the economic outlook optimistic. promotes economic activity and prevents stagflation in the economy. Why? Because how it promotes economic activity? Because investment will take place only when the businessman or investor finds it profitable, and it will be profitable only when they feel that yes, prices for these products where they are investing will increase in future. Second is, it is helpful in the mobilization of resources by increasing the overall rate of savings and investment. Inflationary financing has in fact been widely used to finance economic growth of underdeveloped countries. Third reason is like it is historically evident that despite intermittent deflation, the general price level has exhibited a rising trend, and some increase in the general price level is inevitable in a dynamic and progressive economy. Now, price index, if we say like how to calculate or how to measure the inflation. So, price index number is one method to calculate inflation, and according to this technique, inflation is the percentage change in consumer price index, that is CPI, or wholesale price index, that is WPI. CPI is used to measure cost of living, while WPI, that is wholesale price index, is used for general price level. So, how do we calculate inflation according to this method? So, inflation rate is equal to, if we take WPI, then WPI at T minus WPI at T minus 1 divided by WPI at T minus 1 multiplied by 100. So, this T is the time period like for which year we are taking, and T minus 1 is the previous year wholesale price index. Similarly, if we talk about CPI, that is consumer price index, then it will be CPI in the time period T minus CPI T minus 1 divided by CPI T minus 1 into 100. Now, another way is like GNP deflator. So, GNP deflator means the ratio of nominal GNP and real GNP, and in the equation form you can say that GNP deflator is equal to nominal GNP divided by real GNP. So, nominal is in terms of money, when we calculate then it is a nominal GNP. So, GNP deflator is assumed to be better measurement of inflation than CPI and WPI based inflation measurement. This is because CPI is based on consumer goods only, and WPI is based on wholesale prices, and it does not consider retail prices. Now, if we talk about types of inflation, okay, there are different types of inflation, and these types can also be divided on the basis of different parameters. Like if we talk about like types of inflation on the basis of reason or the causes of inflation, then the types are like currency inflation. So, this type of inflation is caused by when the supply of money increases in the economy, or by caused by the printing of currency notes, because if more currency notes are printed by Reserve Bank of India or by Government of India, then supply of money will increase, people will have more money, they will have more purchasing power, they will demand more goods, and that will lead to inflation. So, this type of inflation, which is caused by increasing the money supply in the economy, is known as currency inflation. Another type of inflation on the basis of cause is only credit inflation. Now, being profit making institution, commercial banks sanction more loans and advances to the public than the economy needs. So, such credit expansion lead to a rise in the price level, because the credit expansion will lead to increase in the demand. Now, for example, nowadays that demand for any consumer durables are increasing as comparative to earlier days. So, what is the reason behind it? The main reason is the credit facilities, bank finance that are available in the market. Like suppose if you want to buy a car, even if you don't have that much amount in your hand, you can easily buy it because there are easy credit facilities which are available. Okay, so you can just make a very small down payment and you can get loan from the bank with a very easy rate of interest, easy installment. So therefore that leads to increase in the demand and which further increase the price in the economy. So this type of inflation is known as credit inflation. Another type on the basis of causes only, deficit induced inflation. So the budget of the government reflects a deficit when expenditure exceeds revenue. Now to meet this gap, the government may ask the central bank, to print more notes, more money, and that will also lead to increase in the inflation. So in case of India, you can see that we have always a deficit budget. Okay, so deficit budget means to fill that gap, money supply has to be increased in the economy, and which will lead to increase in the money supply, and which is a way of cause of inflation in the Indian economy. Then on the basis of the rate of inflation, there are different types. Like first is moderate inflation. When the general price level rises at a moderate rate over a long period of time, then it is called moderate inflation or creeping inflation. Creepers, how they move? Creepers move like this. So creepers moves at a very slow pace. So therefore this type of inflation, when the rate is very low and which moves like a creepers in a very slow pace, then it is known as moderate inflation or creeping inflation. So it is not harmful for the economy, and moderate rate of inflation is always good for the economy, for any economy. Okay, then another type of inflation is galloping inflation on the basis of the rate of inflation. So this is very high rate of inflation, normally double or triple digit annual inflation rate. But this definition too is not very precise, because double and triple digit inflation ranges between 10 and 999, that means 999%, and the economic effects of inflation in this range will be immensely different. So a country with 900% annual inflation rate will have very devastating effect, whereas a country with 20 to 30% inflation can manage without pressing the alarm bell for the people in the economy or to the policy holders. So the post-war one, inflation in Germany is often called as a classic example of galloping inflation, though some would call it hyperinflation, which is even worse than galloping inflation. But the wholesale price in Germany increased 140% in 1921 and is colossal 100% in 1922. So in 1923 again, prices increased in Germany at an average rate of 500% per month. So you can imagine the rate of increase in the prices of the commodity in Germany after World War I. Hyperinflation, another type of inflation on the basis of rate of inflation. So this is deadly strain where prices are rising a million or even trillion% per year. In general, a price rise at more than 3-digit rate per annum is called hyperinflation. So the price rise in zillion and quadrillion percentage makes the meaning of hyperinflation obscure, and it goes beyond the mental vision of the number. The following anecdotes about German hyperinflation would reveal that happens during the period of hyperinflation. People carried basket load of money to the market and brought goods in a pocket. It was cheaper to burn currency notes to make tea rather than buying it in a tea shop. So that was the level of inflation in the Germany after this World War. Okay, and the price of house in pre-inflation period was just sufficient to pay a day's rent in the post-inflation period. Okay, so at the time of entering the cafe, the price of a cup of tea was 4,000 marks, which rose to 8,000 marks before one could finish the coffee. So you can imagine like the time which a person takes in consuming one cup of coffee within that time period the price of that coffee becomes double, almost the double. So that was the situation in the Germany after the World War. Okay, so inflation can create chaos in the economy that may cause negative impact on all the people living in the economy. Okay, so next topic that we can discuss is the impact of inflation. So what is the impact if prices increases in the economy? What is the impact on different sections of the society, different types of people? Like, people are there, those who are businessmen, those who are wage earners, those who are investors. So in this we are going to discuss like what will be the impact on different sections of the society. The social and economic effect of inflation, are all pervasive in nature. It affects all those who depends on market for their livelihood. The effect of inflation may be favorable or unfavorable and low or high depending upon the rate of inflation and also depending upon the nature of work that population, that those people are doing in the economy. Now, for example, a galloping and hyperinflation have devastating effect on the economy and have serious social and political implications too. But if it is a moderate rate of inflation, then it will not be harmful to the economy. In fact, that will also lead to the economic growth of the country. So while discussing the impact of inflation on different sections of the society, so let us first see what is the effect of inflation on distribution of income and wealth. Okay, like if price increases, what happens to the distribution of income of the country? In whose favor it goes? Who are the sufferer? So during inflation, usually people experiences a rise in income, and specifically those who are businessmen, those who are investor, their income increases. But some people gain during inflation at the expense of the others. So some individuals gain because their money income rises more rapidly than the prices, and some lose because price rise more rapidly than their income during the inflation. So therefore what happens is it redistributes income, and what happens in general that is the product prices increases first at a faster rate and input prices, especially wages, increases later at a low rate. So therefore there is always a time lag between the rise in the prices, output prices and input prices. For example, prices of goods and services increases first always in general, and wages of labor after a time gap. So it is a general practice that when price of consumer goods increases, dearness allowances is paid after a time gap to the people, those who are working. So this is also the general case, and as a result what happens that wage income flow to producers of wage goods first and at a faster rate than the reverse flow, and consequently inflation causes redistribution of income in favor of the producer. So rich and producers become richer, and those who are the laborers, wage earners, they get poorer. So therefore in other words you can say that rich get richer and poor get poor, and therefore there is redistribution of income which goes in favor of rich people, which goes in favor of the producers, which goes in favor of the investors. And who are the sufferer? The sufferers are the wage earners, or the people or employees, those who are working in these factories or in these business houses. Another way of the impact of inflation that we can see is the impact on the creditors and debtors. Now in this situation, when there is inflation, borrowers gain and lenders lose during inflation, because debts are fixed in rupee terms. When debts are repaid, their real value declines by the price level increases, and hence creditors lose. Or in other words, for example, suppose if there are two individuals A and B. Now A is the creditor, suppose B take loan from A. So A becomes creditor and B becomes debtor. Now, if B is taking loan today and the rate of interest is decided today, and rate of interest is not the return for inflation, but it is the return for departing from money, and suppose this individual B, those who is taking loan from A, is going to repay that money after 1 year to A. Now, after 1 year, if suppose there is inflation, if prices increases in the economy, so this rupees which B has taken today, which he is going to return after 1 year to A, their value will go down. So, therefore, when creditor is going to get their money back at that time, the value of that amount will be much less, and therefore, we say that creditors are the losers and debtors are the gainers when there is inflation in the economy. Another category is about bond and debenture holders. And in an economy, there are some people who live on interest income. So, they suffer the most because bond holders earn fixed interest income, and these people suffer a reduction in real income when price rises, because when price rises, the interest that is fixed in advance, the real value of that interest amount goes down when price increases. So, therefore, bond and debenture holders, if prices of those bonds are not increasing and they are dependent only on the interest income, then they are the sufferer when there is inflation in the economy. Another category to see the impact of inflation is salaried people and wage earners. Now, anyone earning a fixed income is damaged by inflation. Sometimes, workers succeed in raising wage rates of white collar workers as compensation against price rise, but wage rate changes with a long time lag. Okay, like suppose as we have seen in the earlier points that price of goods and services increases today, but the hike in the wage or salaries or dearness allowance will take place after maybe 6 months or after 1 year. So, there is always a time lag. So, in other words, you can say that wage rate increases always lag behind price increases. So, inflation results in a reduction in the real purchasing power or fixed income earners. So, on the other hand, people earning flexible incomes may gain during the inflation, but people those who are under the category of fixed income earners like salaried people and wage earners, they are always the sufferer at the time of inflation. Another category is on like effect on production and economic growth. The effect of inflation on economic growth can be examined at both theoretical and empirical level. So, let us first examine the issue of inflation and economic growth at theoretical level. Theoretically, the rate of economic growth depends primarily on the rate of capital formation, which depends on the rate of savings and investment. So, therefore, whether inflation affects economic growth positively or negatively depends on whether it affects savings and investment positively or negatively. So, most economists hold the view that there is a positive relationship between inflation and saving and investment. So, therefore, inflation is conducive to economic growth. That means inflation leads to economic growth, and it always helps in increasing the growth of the economy. And most economists generally agree that a moderate rate of inflation is conducive to economic growth, and that in short run there is positive relationship between moderate rate of inflation and economic growth. Okay, so that was the basics about the inflation, what is the meaning of inflation, types of inflation, impact of inflation. Okay, so I am sure you must have understood now what inflation is all about. So, thank you so much, and we will discuss more in the other session now. Thank you.